All right, we have moved up into the Chicago Bulls, another really weird team. Wow, like
Yeah.
this like just like Brooklyn and Charlotte, they follow in this tradition of like being like, is this team good at offense or defense, and can we trust their standings? And this team finished 40-42 last year. They made the play-in tournament. They beat the Raptors and almost beat the Heat to make the playoffs
Yeah.
before the Heat decided to begin their finals run right in that like second half of the Chicago game. And Chicago was down big to the Raptors. I was watching that game at a bar and I was just like sitting there being like, oh, the Raptors are gonna crush they were down 18 or something like that, and Pascal Siakam was just murdering them, and then the Raptors just completely fell apart. DeMar DeRozan's daughter was screaming on free throws. The Raptors ended up missing like 16 free throws or something obscene like that, and the Bulls pulled out. They had the 24th ranked offense last year, despite having DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, and Vucevic, and being an offensive team, and despite having those 3 weak defenders, were the fifth ranked defense, top 5 defense in the NBA.
I think people sleep on Billy Donovan's ability as a defensive coach,
I
honestly.
don't. I have been banging the Billy Donovan. Not that I'm like a personal fan of his or whatever, but like it is just undeniable what this guy has done on defense. Like he's put together his. I mean, he's got one really really good defender, and Alex
Yeah.
Caruso.
Yeah, like
That,
one on the whole
like,
team.
yeah, Alex Caruso's like 6'4". Not exceptionally long or anything like that. He is. I think there's a really strong argument, and I'm like that Alex Caruso is the best defensive guard in the NBA, and like I think he might be the best defensive guard in the NBA, like by a margin.
Like, how else would you explain how this team is good on defense somehow?
Yeah, Patrick Williams actually had a pretty solid defensive season last year,
Yeah.
and I think he's a really intriguing player to watch going forward. Like he could really bust out. I mean, he's so big and multi-positional, and they don't have any like forwards on this roster really. Like
Yeah,
this is
not really.
yeah. Before we get in the roster, maybe let's talk a little bit about what they did in the offseason.
Okay, I mean it's mostly extending their current guys. They re-signed Io to a 3-year, $21 million deal. They re-signed Vooch to a 3-year, $60 million deal, and then they re-signed Kobe White to a 3-year deal that has some incentives in it.
Yeah,
I think it's around how much was it? $40 million range if all the incentives hit.
yeah,
So yeah, and then they did not have a pick this year, but they traded they traded some future second rounders to get into the second round this year. They drafted Julian Phillips, who I was really high on going into the
yeah.
draft. I thought was an underrated prospect. We'll see. I mean, he does fit that like defensive wing archetype that it seems like this team could definitely use because they don't have a lot of guys on the roster who fit that right now. They also picked up Adama Sinogo, who I was a little bit surprised wasn't drafted. He was the best player on the championship winning Yukon Huskies team from last
Mhm.
year. But he is an undersized center, and he's kind of a larger man who isn't the most fleet of foot. So I kind of get it. It's not really the type of player that teams want to spend draft picks on, but like he's undeniably really skilled around the basket, has excellent touch, has excellent rebounding instincts.
Is he on a
I
two
would,
way or is he
yeah,
on the full roster?
I think he's on a 2-way. But yeah, I do think he'll play, and I think he has a chance of actually becoming a long term part of this team. They also picked up Torrey Craig, who
Yeah,
I mean, Torrey Craig's really good, and
yeah.
part of that was helped just being on the Suns, being the fifth guy around a bunch of stars, just open threes all day. But yeah, he's a really solid 2-way player.
Yeah, definitely
I
a
like that
playoff
pickup.
rotation level wing. Like,
Oh, and their big signing was Javon Carter, who of course I got to last. Kind of stole him away from the Bucks.
yeah, and drafted him at a position like John Carter had a great season. He like he finally hit enough threes to let his like point of attack defense really shine.
Yeah,
And
he'll fill in the Pat Beverly role.
yeah, who was filling in the Lonzo Ball role? Like
Hmm.
this defense. I mean, we saw the vision 2 seasons ago when the Bulls came out on fire and had the like one of the most terrifying point of attack defenses I've seen since like Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen Bulls. Just like
Yeah,
Lonzo Ball and Alex Caruso were just scaring people, just like
just
like
just eating
digging and
up
recovering.
pick and
Yeah,
rolls, just getting their hands on passes and grabbing the
Not letting
ball
any
and
passes go into the
yeah.
posts. Like they were everywhere. It was incredible. It was so fun to watch, and no one predicted that because everyone was making fun of how bad the Bulls defense was going to be because they
One
put
of
DeMar DeRozan with
one of the dumbest modern NBA takes. I mean,
what?
I'm sorry, like everyone projecting the Bulls to be like the historically worst defense just because they signed DeMar DeRozan and traded for Vucevic. I mean, it
Why?
made
I
no
mean, that seems like a pretty good reason to have the worst
no,
defense.
it made no sense at the time.
Explain.
I mean, I was the guy on Real GM defending the Bulls at the time. Like this was one of the things I felt the most strong about. And I didn't think the Bulls were going to be great. But I was like, look, this is a team. I mean, maybe I was a little bit overly optimistic on Lonzo Ball, but I mean, I did think that like their backcourt defense was really elite. And I thought Vucevic was like solid positionally. As long as you don't let him get overwhelmed on the drop where it's like 2 versus 1, he's okay.
Mhm.
Um, and then yeah, like their wings have a weakness there, but you know, I wasn't gonna call them like elite or anything, but I was simply pointing out the fact like calling this the worst defense of all time is just silly.
Well, I mean, you ended up being right. So, I mean, though they ended up having a meh defensive season in 2022. But then they bounced back this year without Lonzo Ball. I don't really think it makes sense, which is why I'm surprised that anyone was projecting it. When
Yeah.
they traded for Vucevic, like they were a playoff team, and then they finished out the season just like unable to guard anything. Like Zach Levine
Mhm.
got hurt, but that's not really affecting their defense. Obviously,
But
it doesn't affect
this
their
is a very
offense.
process oriented defense. Like you need time to work together and gel and drill some things out.
Right. I mean, I didn't think they're going to be the worst defense of all time. I thought their defense was going to be bad enough that they weren't going to be a playoff team, and that's not really like what happened. I still do not understand it though. Like DeMar
Yeah.
DeRozan, I was like, oh, I'll watch the Bulls. Maybe DeMar's not as bad as I remember. He is. He's like a 6'6" Trey Young out there. Like no one even notices he's there. He's like there
Yeah.
waving his arms around, just getting out of people's way, and like you just never. He's one of those players where it's like there is no physical force being generated by DeMar's defense. Like when he's guarding you, you just kind of keep dribbling and okay, now I'm at the rim and DeMar's still here and I'm taking a layup and DeMar's still here next to me. Maybe it's comforting to have DeMar next to you when you're
I just don't think you can understate how important it is to not have guards who can get through screens. And
yeah,
who can prevent that 2v1 happening against your center because that's just like that just kills teams. I just remember a few years ago in the playoffs when we had that like epic Denver Utah series in the bubble, and for the first 3 games, Gary Harris was still coming back from an injury, um, and Jokic was getting really exposed. You know, like
yeah,
the Denver's defense was just getting torched, and then Gary Harris comes back, and you have a guy who can get through screens and really like just shut down that initial point of penetration, and it's like
yeah.
a light switch happened. Like immediately, Denver went from this porous defense to like a pretty solid one overnight.
And one thing
Um,
that Billy Donovan does really well is hide DeMar DeRozan because I have so many memories of DeMar DeRozan in Toronto being that guard that couldn't get over screens, and so Jonas Valanciunas would be backpedaling 2-on-1 on like every Raptors defensive breakdown was like they got a 2-on-1 against Jonas Valanciunas, and
yeah,
Raptors fans are all like so angry about Jonas Valanciunas. So like, where was DeMar? Like, who got
yeah.
screened, right? Like, why was there a 2-on-1? Like unless you're Jaren Jackson Jr. or like Joel Embiid sometimes or Rudy Gobert, like, or just, I mean, not even those centers, you want to see them in a 2-on-1 kind of thing. You do have to look for that guard. So I do agree with you
It's just
that
huge because almost every offense in the NBA is really based and grounded in the pick and roll. And if and it's not just like layups at the rim either. Like it's also open 3 pointers that come out of that action if you
yeah,
can't guard it. So if you can turn every team's bread and butter from an awesome, highly efficient offensive action to like a poor one, like
yeah,
that's huge, and that's what the Bulls do.
yeah. Some like a couple. DeMar's getting up there in age.
Yeah,
So, I mean, he's going to be, is he 34? He's either 34 now. I think he just turned 34 or is about to anyways. So there, you do worry about a little bit of injury related decline there. How old is Vucevic? Like, I think he's a year younger than DeMar. Um, so I worry about those aging pieces. Hopefully,
Yeah, 32, a couple years younger.
Zach LaVine was very hampered by his knee surgery last year, but he's in his physical prime, and I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of bounced back a little bit, and got back to what he was doing back in 2021 when he was really like busting out as an elite level offensive player. I also think Zach LaVine defensively, he's not good, but he's not he does try. He's like he's a high effort good athlete, but he's not defensively smart, and he's also just kind of he's skinny,
Yeah,
and he dies on screens as much as anyone. He gets caught ball watching. Like the defensive awareness is low there, but I think the days of him being a total defensive joke are kind of over. He stabilized as sort of like below average defender, but not like not upsetting. And again, they've got the signings that we're talking about. They clearly um, support your theory of this team just wanting to build everything around those point of attack guards. And so expect Javon Carter to play minutes. And Ayo Dosunmu is like someone that I think they really want to like have like, grow him towards that role kind of thing. And yeah, and hopefully a, a breakout year for Patrick Williams, though I still just don't see him getting the touches on a team that has Levine, DeRozan, and Vucevic. Vucevic doesn't even get touches. Like they never let Vucevic touch the ball.
yeah. I mean, Kobe White is another guy who last year had his most disappointing scoring season. He really took a step back offensively, but I thought he took some strides defensively. Kind of went from a headless chicken running around, not really sure what he's doing, to a guy who really fit into their system. So
I
I
think
think,
that anyone who watched, like, you're right, like the numbers aren't there, but I thought it was very clearly a good progress year for Kobe White and his long term future in the NBA. He was just doing a lot more of like kind of little things in decision making that
yeah,
where he just
just
wasn't getting
smarter
it.
decisions on the court. Like he did become less of an offense only guy, gunner type coming off of the bench.
Career low turnover rate, which is like a big deal for him kind of thing, and just sort of like shot the ball well, demonstrated way better shot selection, just kind of showed that he can like use his head a little bit more, because he was just this sort of like over aggressive guard without quite enough firepower to justify that aggressiveness. And I'm really interested to see how he grows, though there will be some like competition for it's a really crowded backcourt. We got Alex Caruso, Kobe White, Aya Dosunmu, Zach LaVine, Dalen Terry, Javon Carter, um, DeMar. They basically play as like a four on offense, so I guess, but he's still a ball handler. So how they build out around it, they haven't re-signed Javonte Green yet, which I think is interesting because he was a important. He was like when Patrick Williams wasn't out there last year, he was kind of their like power forward or guy that they would pair with DeMar to kind of like give a little bit more physicality in lineups.
Yeah, he's still unsigned. So, I mean, there's still a chance that he comes back to Chicago.
Yeah, it'd be cool. Julian Phillips has a chance to maybe like sneak into the rotation though, just because he's one of the only guys above 6'5" on this roster.
I hope so, man. I love Julian Phillips.
Yeah, I mean, you talked me into him as well, so we're both rooting. We're both on the Julian Phillips train here.
He's my favorite Bull. I mean, Patrick Williams was one of my favorite players in the 2021 draft.
Right.
I was really high on him. And I mean, injuries have really derailed his early career. Like he missed
Yeah.
almost all of the prior season due to like the wrist injury.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he's made nice defensive progress. He's just still such a like reluctant shot taker.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think there's probably a confidence thing that has to grow, because like he's a competent shot maker when he takes them. He just, for whatever reason, doesn't seem to like really fit into the offensive flow very well.
Yeah. I was low on him in the draft, and then I remember seeing him in like summer league or something and being like, "Oh my god, he's so big."
Yeah, baby
Like,
Kawhi.
yeah, that's what people were saying, and I get it because he was like a physical force with a pull up game, but like the
Yeah.
pull up game is still, yeah, the decision making on offense isn't there yet. Sometimes that comes with experience though, so someone to keep an eye on. But again, it's going to be a low usage role in
Yeah,
Chicago.
Kawhi was a very low usage, very reluctant offensive player his first couple of years in the league too. So
You know what? He wasn't super reluctant though. Like he was like no one can keep you in a solid low usage role like Greg Popovich can. Like,
mhm.
but you could see like every year they let Kawhi do a little bit more, but whatever he did it pretty decisively. Like when he
Yeah.
was only allowed to take corner threes, he never hesitated on a corner three.
Mm.
When they freed him up to like attack the offensive glass a little bit more, or just integrated a little bit more Kawhi cutting into the offense, he did that with like aggressiveness. Patrick Williams does not have that.
Yeah.
He looks like you said, like he's tentative, and he's a little janky in his offensive decision making, and never looks like. Sometimes Patrick Williams just gets blocked by a smaller player because he like, I don't know, went into a Euro step and didn't know what he was doing and got indecisive like mid drive, and all of a sudden he's
Oh
just kind
man,
of jumping in the air and like a 6'2" guy's blocking him, and just like, so. Anyways, a lot of room to grow there.
I
Anything?
can relate to that so hard.
Yeah, fair enough. Any other Chicago thoughts, or shall we move on to the
Um,
final team of the
no,
pod?
I mean, I think Chicago's going to challenge for making one of those low seeds in the playoffs this year. Like, I think we've gotten to the point in our little podcasting journey here where we're starting to talk about, at least solid play-in teams. I think Chicago's going to be at least a 500 team, maybe a little bit higher than that if Zach LaVine has a big bounce back year.
I'm a Chicago hater because I'm a DeMar hater, and I'm a Zach LaVine hater, um, and so I want to like boost them. I want to be like, yeah, Chicago's not even making the play. Like that's like instinctively I want to bump them down the standings, but it's not reasonable. They
Yeah,
had a really unfortunate, unlucky season last year in terms of injuries.
and they're
And
still
like,
like 500.
yeah, and
So
like
the floor on this team is high.
they had a top five defense, and like they clearly have a much higher offensive ceiling. Like I would be
Mm,
surprised if they repeated the top five defense again, but what if they do and their offense doesn't suck this year? Because they
yeah.
have the tools for their offense not to suck. Even if they are, I think they are really low on playmaking decision makers. I think
Mhm.
Levine, like DeMar creates for himself, Levine creates for himself. Like Vucevic is like versatile, but he's like this offensive support piece, and they're lacking that playmaker to have a really good offense. But obviously, they can finish better than they did last year. So yeah, what if they're just the 12th ranked offense and still had an elite defense? Like, okay, well that's just like a good playoff team. Like I still think I don't have, even if this team can make the playoffs, I do not believe in them as like being able to take down a good opponent in the playoffs, because I do think,
No, yeah,
like, I mean, people want to celebrate DeMar, and I'm going to put my DeMar hater hat back on, but you can just turn him off in the playoffs. If you just have a larger defensive wing, that you're going to, he gets away the whole season by being allowed to post up two guards and have a field day, and no one, because he doesn't sort of like, create a lot with the passing, people just kind of like live with it. And then the moment the playoffs hit, they're just like, oh, we're going to turn off DeMar. And they just do. And that's it. So
yeah. No, I get it. I'm not projecting Chicago to upset the one seed and make a run a la the Heat last year, but yeah, just solid team.
yeah. Yeah. All right.